Appeals for Kent County, Maryland. This 21st day of August is in session. Dr. Al Townsend, Joan Horsey, and John Massey sitting, David Hill observing. Chris Drummond is serving as attorney for the board. Bill Mackey, Mark Carper, and Campbell Safin are serving as staff. The board has before it the application of 25809A Still Pond Neck LLC. The clerk will now read into the record the notice of the hearing, all pertinent facts, and will identify all correspondence received in this matter, which has been provided by to the members of the board.
The following notice was placed in the Kent County News on August 10th, 2023. On Monday, August 21st, 2023, at 5 p.m., the Kent County Board of Appeals will hold a public hearing in the County Commissioners' Hearing Room in 400 High Street, Chestertown, Maryland. 25809A Still Pond Neck LLC, requesting an extension of special exception approval to construct and operate a utility-scale solar system in the agricultural zoning district. The property is located at map 12, parcel 98, and has the newly assigned address of 26001 Still Pond Neck Road. Members of the public may attend the meeting in person or observe and/or comment by phone. If you have any questions, please contact the department at 410-778-7423. Letters were mailed to adjacent property owners on July 25th, 2023, and the property was posted on July 6th. No correspondence was received for this application.
Wait a minute.
Good.
The property was posted when?
July 26th.
Oh, 26th, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you.
The hearing will follow this procedure. The applicant will present their case, after which the board and anyone present may cross-examine them in regard to their testimony. If the applicant should have any witnesses to speak on their behalf, they each will testify, and the board and anyone present may cross-examine each witness in regard to their testimony. Anyone else present who wishes to testify on behalf of the applicant can do so and then be cross-examined. Protestants may then testify, after which each one may be cross-examined in regard to their testimony by the board and anyone present. The board has at its discretion may call staff or another person deemed appropriate to testify, after which staff or the witness called may be cross-examined in regard to their testimony by the board or anyone present. After everyone has testified, then the applicant and protestants may each be allowed to present closing arguments. Will the applicant please come forward? If you all raise your right hand, do you declare that the testimony that you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay, please be seated. And each of you would each of you please state your name and position or occupation with regard to the testimony that you're about to give.
Is this on or do we press this while we're speaking?
Green's on.
Good afternoon. I'm Tony Cooper-Smith with McAllister, Detar, Showalter, and Walker, 100 Northwest Street, Easton, Maryland, on behalf of the applicant.
Yes, I'm Josh Spencer. I'm the project manager for this for Pivot Energy.
I'm James Morgan. I am a site originator for Pivot Energy.
I'm sorry, your name, please?
James Morgan.
My name is Ted Hastings. I'm an associate with Becker Morgan Group, the civil engineer for this project.
I'm sorry, your name again, please?
Ted Hastings,
Could you spell the last name?
Hastings.
I'm sorry, slow down.
Hastings.
H-A-S. Oh, Hastings. Okay.
Yes.
Engineer. And Mr. Morgan, what did you say your position is?
I'm a manager of site origination. I'm sorry.
Manager?
A manager of site origination.
Site originate, boy, that's fancy.
For Pivot Energy.
Mr. Spencer, we have his letter, so he's the engineer. And Tony's the mouthpiece. Okay, Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. So you all may recall, we were before you last year for the original approval of this project, and it was originally approved. We had a hearing on, I believe it was September 17th or 19th, 2022. The written decision to approve the special exception was issued about a month later, October 17th, 2022. Under the code, the special exceptions are good for 1 year, and specifically it says in the code that the special exception shall be valid for 1 year after the date of approval and thereafter shall become null and void unless construction or use is substantially underway during said 1 year period, or unless the Board of Appeals, where applicable, the planning director approves an extension before the expiration of said 1 year period. When provided with sufficient evidence, the board, or where applicable, the planning director may grant a special exception for a longer period. So we are approaching that 1 year time period on the original special exception approval. And that special exception, as you may recall, was for a utility scale solar project in the AZD district in the Still Pond area. So we're here tonight to ask for an extension of that special exception. We will not, as things have currently gone, be able to substantially commence construction by that 1 year mark. And by the way, we believe the 1 year mark may fall in October, but we understand staff may believe that it falls on the date of the hearing. But either way, that 1 year mark is coming up. So we're here to ask for an extension of the special exception to allow more time so that all the permits and improvements that need to occur in order to allow construction to occur can be obtained for the project. The project team has been diligently seeking to obtain all of those necessary approvals since you all gave your initial approval last year. But there have been some unexpected things that have arisen, and that's why construction has not started. And the main issue here has been that it was one month after the special exception written decision was issued, so November of 2022 of last year, Delmarva Power, who's the utility that this project is interconnecting with, they issued a cost estimate for the upgrades necessary for the project. And the price tag attached to that was surprisingly large and was unanticipated. It was approximately $1.77 million, the vast majority of which involved upgrades that would have needed to occur to the substation. And that price tag was so large that it basically rendered the project not feasible in terms of having to pay that as a part of the project financial picture. So the team went back to the drawing board with Delmarva Power, had back and forth with them as soon as they got this news, and the net of that was that Delmarva Power said, look, if you can redesign the project to reduce the scale of the project somewhat, then those charges will be reduced, and you won't have to pay you'll have to pay for some of the improvements, but not the original amount that was contemplated. And so that whole process of the back and forth with Delmarva Power, that took some months into early 2023, and it was not until April of 2023 that kind of that final determination by Delmarva Power was made. And so then the team redesigned the project to reduce the number of panels so that the capacity of the system wouldn't be as putting out as much power as it would have before. But the footprint of the system is basically the same as what was before. So it's when we're here before you, it's not that we're not seeking to be any closer to the road, not seeking to reduce any of the setbacks, not seeking to add additional components. This is a reduction in terms of the capacity of the system to produce, and everything else is the same about the project, about the layout of the project and the buffering and all of that. So that's that's the gist of this. With the reduced level of production capacity, it will serve fewer subscribers than before, but it still provides a material benefit to the county and to those folks who use Delmarva Power and who may want to participate in a community solar program.
Why not reduce the footprint?
So we'll address that. I think that's a good question. We'll address that. Understood. So just as a initial matter, I've got a packet here with some exhibits, if I may, for the board members. Sure. And these are items that are relevant to the discussion and the information that I just gave you. How many of these do we need? 5. You put one for you. And Bill, do you want these or? Okay.
Are you asking that these be made part of the record?
Yes, asking that these be made part of the record, as well as the original special exception, which there's a copy of the written decision for the special
They're part of
exception.
the file already. so
Right,
that's
right,
fine.
okay. And we would ask that the record from the original special exception approval be incorporated by reference into this proceeding.
Okay.
Okay.
That's reasonable.
Thank you.
So Mr. Chairman, they've asked that the A through K be admitted as exhibits in this hearing. I think this is the opposition back here. Perhaps they could be given a copy to see if there's any objection to the board looking at these. We'll just give them a minute.
Yeah.
Is this a detailed description of what the letter you sent us regarding each section of the
Right.
changes that were going to be necessary?
Right. This has information that corroborates the letter, what was stated in the letter. The letter included the outline of the rationale for the extension. And so this includes some of the communications with Delmarva Power. It includes the cost estimate that triggered this issue. And then it also includes a comparison of the old layout and the new layout, so you can see side by side what this looks like. It has the new revised site plan. It has requests that the applicant made to the utility, because when the utility said you can redesign the system, then they actually had to redesign the system and resubmit their application, their interconnection application. But a complicating factor there, which we'll discuss further, is that the Public Service Commission, which administers the community pilot, the community solar pilot program, they also are involved in the process. And so they needed to be consulted, and they needed to approve the change in the system size, the reduction in the system size. And so the utility Delmarva Power, they were holding the application for the revised system, but they needed to get that confirmation from the Public Service Commission that the Public Service Commission recognized that this system could change. So that there's kind of a further delay that occurred there. On August 16th, just recently, the Public Service Commission approved or confirmed that the system size could be reduced to 525 kilowatts. That is one of the exhibits in here. That's Exhibit G. And then
This is part of the pilot program?
it is,
Okay.
yeah. And then the other part of the rationale for the extension, which is it's more of a subsidiary element of this, but the last 4 exhibits relate to this, H through K. In addition, the Planning Commission, when they approved the site plan in January of this past year, when they approved the original site plan, there are certain conditions that are attached to that approval, which the applicant has to fulfill before they can get a building permit. So separate and apart from the delay, the unexpected delay associated with Delmarva Power and the Public Service Commission, the applicant simultaneously was attempting to fulfill the conditions that the Planning Commission set out in its approval of the site plan. And that, the main issue that we have tonight about that is approving the bond for the decommissioning. And Josh and the team can speak further about that, but that took some time to get a quote, and then the quote had to be updated in light of the change in the system size. So that took some additional time as well. So that's a secondary rationale for the extension. But the upshot of all of this is that it's, the team has been pursuing this diligently. Everybody has spent a great deal of time on this project, hopes and expects that the project will proceed. The board, you all have also been involved. We've had, I think this is our third time before you. And then the commissioners were also involved in terms of clarifying the zoning ordinance with respect to the 5 acres. And the 5-acre issue should not be an issue related to this. I'm only just recapping where we've been. The point being that everybody has put a lot of time into this, and we are seeking an extension so that this process, which we've all invested in, can be seen through and completed. So I will, unless there are any questions right now, I would turn this over to Josh from the applicant to, kind of go into a little bit more detail about this issue with the interconnection with Delmarva Power, the cost estimate, the Public Service Commission role.
Mr. Drummond, do we need approval to give approval to,
So whether they've offered them as to become part of the record
yes,
exhibits, and because I believe there's opposition here, we've had them look at it, so it would be appropriate to ask if there's any objections to the board considering them, and if so, if they could identify the basis for their objection.
okay. Is there any objection to the admission of the additional information that's been presented?
Okay, well, then they should be received.
Good. So we will enter this into the record. Did you?
There'll be
just have-
applicants' exhibits A through K.
I just had a question. Because of the changes, this is a procedure question. Would Planning Commission have to go back and notify the neighbors,
The Planning Commission,
or the staff? Would the neighbors have to be notified
they
as
were
they,
notified.
They were, I believe.
of the
Oh,
changes?
no.
Oh, no, they were notified of the hearing.
Right.
They were not notified, to my knowledge, as to the details of the changes. That's,
My question is, should they be? I don't know.
well, that would be the kind of thing that you, if you're interested, you show up to the hearing to learn the
Okay.
details
Okay.
and be presented with these exhibits. Obviously, it would have been nice if they'd been presented before 10 minutes ago, but they weren't, so.
Is there, do you think that there is a need to go into this kind of detail with regard to the
Requested extension?
request for extension as
That
opposed?
would be up to you. Obviously, the code is set up so that the special exception, conditional use, I mean the same thing, are, the use is promptly put into place and and not, it doesn't linger. There's reasons for that, obviously, is that codes change, and you don't want a project out there that's been approved under this code when the code has had a number of changes, and then 5 years later, they come in and say, okay, now we're ready for a building permit, but there's been all these changes in the meantime. I don't think that's the case here, but that's one of the reasons that special exceptions have shelf life.
Well, I guess my concern is that,
I don't know, and all of these details are an attempt, to, as I understand it, to explain why they haven't gotten anywhere yet on the ground. And hope that you would find that they are doing the best they can, and they really do want to do the project. I'm summarizing what the argument will be, I'm not necessarily endorsing it, and give us some more time because we're really working hard. That's basically what all this is.
would it be appropriate to, if it's okay with the board tonight, would it be appropriate to have the applicant use this as a reference in any questions that might come up from the opposition or from the board
If all we're going to hear,
and move
we're
forward?
basically going to hear testimony that corroborates what's in the documents, maybe we can cut through that.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah.
Are we
Are we going
thinking.
to hear anything that's not in here? Other than we're working as hard as we can. And we can-
Right, no, yeah, I mean, basically, we would just address put the meat on the bones of what's being provided here as far as explaining, that they have been diligently pursuing this and that it's really factors that are outside of their control that are, driving the need for the delay. Otherwise, they would, they are ready, willing, and able otherwise to put a shovel in the ground. It's just with the utility involved and the unexpected costs and Public Service
I
Commission.
do have, I think it's a legitimate question to ask why that 1.7 million was unanticipated. I mean, wouldn't you
I'm
have done
happy
the due
to
diligence beforehand?
Happy to turn this over and we can
And that,
delve
to
into
me,
this
it makes
further.
sense, is to,
Well, that's a great question. You certainly can use this as a reference to support
to
your
me, it seems
position.
like that's something you all would have figured out before you came here and asked for the approval.
Because we approved a 1 megawatt
That's right.
system.
Yeah, I'd be happy to,
We were told we might have to take out the access roads on the side so we can get enough panels in to make 1 megawatt. Because you had to be 1 megawatt to be profitable, is what you said. Yes, you did.
Well,
I listened to the
at the
tape last
time,
night.
at the time of that, they did not know that Delmarva Power was going to say, you have to spend this much more money in order to be able to even plug this system in.
So if Delmarva Power had said you owe us $50,000 to be able to plug this system in, you might be here now because your solar panels are back ordered or whatever, but you're not.
so,
If I could turn it over to
I think
Josh.
I could help kind of speak on some of those, yeah. So essentially, some of the issues that arose with Delmarva Power were unexpected costs, because typically for like a 1 megawatt system, we're at kind of the lower end of the spectrum of community solar. We can go up to, 2 to up to 5 with the CPCN process also, or 2 megawatts is typically the local jurisdiction cap. So typically for a 1 megawatt project, which is kind of on the smaller side already, we're looking in the order of a few $100,000 for utility improvements. And so this was many magnitudes greater than what we've seen on other projects here in Maryland. And so that's kind of where that unexpected cost arose from, is because there was a very large substation improvement that we did not anticipate, and that their initial pre-application inquiry did not really speak to the level of improvement that would be needed at the substation. There's 3 very short bullets, saying what improvements are needed, but none of them go into detail of like how extensive those improvements might have needed to be at the substation.
Well, can
And
you
then
explain-
another,
okay, could you explain to us what it is that Delmarva is insisting on that takes it from a couple of $100,000 to $300,000 to $1.7 million, and why that would be a surprise?
Yeah, so on Exhibit B, on the DPL cost estimate,
I'm sorry, C?
B.
Oh, B is in boy?
Yes,
Okay.
correct. So
Sorry,
under,
my hearing aids are in my pocket because the batteries ran out.
oh, no problem. So under substation, there's about 4 bullets that are listed detailing what upgrades are needed, including the very first one is upgrading of the single-phase 69 kilovolt potential transformer to a 3-phase transformer. And then it goes on to list some other items as well. And so none of those items were fleshed out and listed in Exhibit A, which just showed that we would need a direct transfer trip, primary metering, and extending 3-phase to the point of intersection. So we already knew that, those bottom 2 costs essentially were pretty much in line with what we needed for distribution and for telecom, but that this application at 2,000 kilowatts will require a direct transfer trip. There's not enough detail in there to be able to anticipate, what upgrades are needed for that direct transfer trip. And so these were on the very high end from other projects that we've seen. This is one of the largest utility
So
interconnection
that we're
costs we've
clear here,
received.
and I do see the dates now. Exhibit A was what you received before you applied for the zoning approval, basically.
Yeah, so typically this pre-application inquiry is very early on in the project, correct?
And the contents of this correspondence from DPL, you're telling us, is what you would have expected for a one or so megawatt installation, and that this is the $200,000 or $300,000.
Yeah, we would anticipate
letter.
from reviewing that, there would be a few hundred thousand,
Then a
maybe in
year-
the $300,000 to $400,000 range.
And then 15 months later, November 17th, 2022, you get updated notice from Delmarva Power that says, well, we kind of undersold it in June of 2021. Now we want all this extra stuff.
Yes, and then on page 2
right,
also,
let's-
they reference a 20 to 24 month timeframe.
What?
And so,
Where are you? I'm sorry.
page 2 on Exhibit B. It's kind of the second to last paragraph before substation upgrades. They reference the estimated time to complete this work is 20 to 24 months, but
I
any
see it.
number of factors can alter the estimated timeframe. So
So who's
essentially,
in charge of the improvements? Delmarva, and you just pay them as they?
yes, we would pay them.
So you're not in charge of the timing of the improvements?
Exactly, and so the 2 month, or the 2 year timeframe is kind of a moving target, and that could be, that could end up being 30 months, 36 months, so, we would anticipate with not having these larger improvements, that the timeline's gonna shrink way down, and we're gonna be able to build this a lot quicker, because even if we, went along with this cost, we're looking at November 17th, 2022, if we pay it immediately, December of 2022, 2 years out is, December of 2024, before we'd even be able to interconnect the system.
All right. So DPL is in charge of construction.
And just to clarify that point, you can't commence construction until DPL has completed the upgrades.
Yeah, so we can't interconnect until that same time. So we can, if they're starting, work and they've already started upgrades and we know, a pretty good estimate on the timeline, we can start and build some of it in parallel, but we'd almost have to wait, essentially, 6 months before they're complete, before we could actually start construction on the site.
Okay.
So you could have to wait another year and a half before you start construction?
Yeah, if we were to follow this timeline, correct, yeah. But if we're able to, basically go through with them and revise down the system size, and then we're able to, get that timeline lower because the improvements will not be as substantial, then we'll be able to build it quicker and not need, the 20 to 24 month timeframe.
Well, is it typical to start doing something while DPL is screwing around? I mean, can you start putting the panels in, or putting the fence up, or moving some?
So timing-wise, we try to sync up our construction so that we finish either at the same time or maybe, slightly before the utility finishes, so that we don't have, a construction crew mobilized out to the site and then have to come back to finish the actual, interconnection process.
Okay.
And then also you have equipment sitting out there that's not being in use that might start to go bad or anything just from sitting out there.
All right. Okay, the other question was, why not reduce the footprint?
Yes, so one of the reasons why we wanted
I'm
to.
not sure that's terribly relevant to your extension request, but I'm quite sure that people back there want to know why you're not making it smaller if you're basically having the size of the output. Not the size, having the,
System capacity, yeah. So a few of the reasons are, we have that conditional site plan approval already, and so we wanted to stay pretty much as consistent with that as possible. So we've sent those plans back, we're negotiating, and addressing some comments on the decommissioning report and some third-party cost estimates currently. So we're getting hopefully closer within the next few weeks to finishing up those. We also had an agreement, a lease agreement, with our landowner who's expecting a certain amount of, lease acreage and dollars. So we're trying to keep them whole and not shrink down their area, below what we committed to them, because we don't want, we want to, honor our word there in our agreement. And then also, just for this purpose as well, coming back for this extension, we wanted to keep it as consistent as possible with the previous approval. And so everything just, in terms of keeping everything moving and getting all of our approvals as quickly as possible, getting to the building permit phase and then getting, shovels in the ground, this is going to be basically the quickest way is for us to keep it the same without having to go back and redo hearings for the site plan as well if we have
Are the
substantial
panels-
changes.
Is the reduction in the panel, I assume it's a reduction in the number of panels, not less efficient panels?
Yes, same panels, just a reduction in the number of panels. The orientation's remaining the same, so the glare analysis is still the same. There's really no change other than just, the density and the spacing between the rows, and less of that, panel coverage across that.
Is it arranged such that if DPW, that's a DP&L, is what I meant to say, not Public Works, changes its mind about the cost of the improvements, that you could install more panels? Or once those panels are in place, you've sort of messed up your opportunity to put more in?
No, I mean, we would go with this system size. DPL, I mean, from every intent and purpose and every indication we've had with them, shouldn't be changing anything with their revision. It took us a few months just to get that final answer from them on what system size would work. So, I mean, if we were to increase the size, it would trigger those substation improvements that would be very costly. And if we did make any changes in the first place, we would have to come back and get another site plan revision, just because we can't, make those changes without coming back before the county.
How many subscribers can you offer the service to?
So initially, and James, I think you might be able to address that. Do you want to jump in on that, or?
Yeah, sure. So for this revised site plan, we'd be expecting about 150 total potential subscribers. So this is it's still going to represent a nice material benefit for the community. And then obviously the revised scope is still financially feasible.
And those subscribers can be any Kent County residents who use
Correct.
DPL?
Correct, yeah, exactly. So any county residents who are serviced by DP&L are able to subscribe to the community solar project and benefit from discounts on their energy or from their utility electricity rates.
Is the size or is the capacity reductions, that has no impact upon the availability of pilot program approval for other nearby properties, right? You only have so many in a geographic area or
It
something?
would open up if somebody else was to come in and potentially be able to use the remainder of that 1 megawatt.
Oh.
Monetarily wise, I don't know that, it would end up, penciling out.
Okay.
And there may still be adjacency type
I don't remember
issues.
the details of that. Remember, you could only have one of these pilot programs. I don't remember if it was per
There's
county or per,
There's an adjacency issue, or there was a
Adjacent
regulation
pro-
that addressed adjacency. It said that you can't be.
Adjacent properties can't come
Right.
together and build a
Because they don't-
huge thing.
Yeah, they don't want you to aggregate a whole bunch of these and say, I'm gonna have a bunch of 2 megawatts next to each other, and suddenly I've got 10 megawatts.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that an adjacent property owner can't have solar, it's just that they
Not in the
can't
pilot
be in
program.
the pilot
Yeah.
program. Yeah. And I think that literally is bounding on, but if you were further down the road in
Yeah.
the same community, again, subject to the economics, the upgrades to the, you could do it potentially.
What qualifies a person to be one of the 100 or 150 participants in this? I
So,
mean, there's
yeah.
20,000 people in the county. How do 150 qualify above and beyond other people? I mean, I'm sure everybody would want to participate in it if there was a discount in cost.
I'll maybe let Josh speak to qualifications of how you can subscribe, but I can say that we're looking at roughly 30% of our subscribers for this would be LMI, low moderate income. And of that 30%, we're looking at 10% of those would be low income. So you can expect Within that group, they would receive roughly a 25% discount on their utility energy rates.
But how about the average person, average home?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other subscribers, I think, would get about a 10%
Yes.
savings on their electrical bill, up to until we have the maximum number of subscribers for the system.
Well, who's paying the shortfall? Are we paying? Am I paying that shortfall?
Yeah.
No, I think that's factored into the model on our end financially.
Pardon me?
It's factored into the model on our end financially. It's part of the kind of,
Taxpayers aren't subsidizing this?
I don't believe so, no.
Mr. Mackey, did,
I just wanted to say, I think Chair's question is, how are people eligible to be part of the program? And I recall applicant responding previously, I believe, first come, first served. Is that the question that's being asked?
Yeah, but you have to have a certain percentage that are of.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
low to moderate
You have
income,
income stratas, and you have to fill those stratas, as I understand it.
correct, yeah.
So if all the rich people come in first, you can't give it all to the rich people. You gotta hold some
Exactly
back for the poorer folks.
Yes, exactly. We
but
have
it's
to,
first
we
come, first
have to
served
keep
on,
those
on either
percentages.
scale.
Yeah, I
Low
guess.
to moderate income and normal,
Right.
regular income.
I don't have any other questions.
If, back in June, when you first went to Delmarva Power and Light, if they looked in their magic ball and said it's gonna cost you $1.7 million to work this project, you wouldn't be in Kent County right now, would you?
No, we still would have, so if we were able to know back then how much it would have cost, we would have revised the system before we submitted, back in June of, 2021. We would have, originally had the submittal just for the revised system size, just to make sure that everything penciled out, and then also that we weren't going to have a 20 to 24 month wait time to be able to even interconnect after we signed up with the utility. And then, with supply chain issues and, a contractor, construction being out of your control, it's hard to gauge, the veracity of a 20 to 24 month timeline, and if that's going to creep, up to 30, 36 months. And so the last thing we would want to do is move with a project that's going to be, breaking ground 3 years, after we've gotten approval.
So I guess my next question would be, you're looking for an extension. Are you looking for a specific time frame?
18 months would be preferable, but if we're, going to get the year extension, we can, work with the utility to fast track things as quickly as possible and make sure that we have construction underway and that everything's moving along with them. Just to give you some status and background on that, the PSC did give us that confirmation of system size on August 16th. So now our interconnection application, I've been, in the portal, bugging DPL just to put it back into technical review for our interconnection application that we had to resubmit for the new system size. I'm working with our contact over there with DPL, who we have biweekly calls with on these projects, just to make sure that we're moving that along, as quickly as possible, getting back into the design phase so that we can get that cost estimate back that will give us the timeline and then also the dollar amount. And then we can, basically pay, essentially, typically they'll charge 50% upfront. So we would pay that money, move them along. They would go into their full design process, which takes about 4 months. So 4 months after that, we should have a interconnection agreement and a final design fully ready to go. We pay that final 50%, and then they're able to start procurement and construction. So, a potential timeline for this is if we're able to get it back into technical review and at the beginning of this, next month, we're looking at maybe end of the year for a final design and interconnection agreement. And then we're looking at, it would be hard for me to just say exactly how long it would be, but for lower improvements, maybe we're looking at 6 months, so middle of summer or maybe early fall. And then we're able to, kind of sync up and hopefully in late spring or early summer start construction on our end, so that we're finishing up around the same time around or slightly after when the utility is, so.
You're not subject to any delays or approvals from PJM for this?
No.
This doesn't involve PJM at all? Okay. Because they take forever.
Sorcy, you have any questions?
I don't think I have any questions.
Mr. Massey, do you have any other questions? Mr. Drummond?
No, you asked the one I was going to ask, which is how many months do you really want? So he told us 18 sounds a lot better than, not better, it's the wrong word, more realistic than 12.
Yeah, we want to make sure that this is the final one. We're not having to come back here, but, you know, we're incentivized just like you all. We want to get this project, you know, we want to get construction started and get it in the ground also.
Did you bring anyone else that wishes to testify?
I'm not sure if I could add any more. I mean, I'm here as the engineer. I can tell you right now for what we showed you before and what we're what we're showing you now has not changed from what we showed you before on an engineering standpoint. The footprint's the same, the access road is the same, the landscaping is the same, so nothing has changed between those two sets of plans. The only thing that's changed is the output and the number of panels.
Could you plant the trees now so they have a chance to start growing?
That might be a good condition. You want your extension, plant some trees.
But it all depends on when the construction starts. Obviously, we don't want to have to plant these trees in the middle of winter, but yeah, if you start now, possibly, but no, I don't think that's feasible. We have to make sure the interconnection's nailed down, and like they said, they want to try to construct all this at the same time if possible. It just makes more economic sense, and,
Doesn't make more buffering sense, though.
No.
well, there's corn out in the field too now, if I'm not mistaken. Is there crops in the field? Because I don't think that gets harvested till mid-October, if I'm not mistaken.
Perfect time to plant some trees.
I'm not an arborist.
Anyone in the audience have questions for the applicant?
I just want to make sure that I understand you need to come forward, sir. You have questions, or do you want?
I just wanted to make sure that I understood everything.
All right, well, come forward, please. Do you have anything else, Tony?
No, we would just reserve the right to respond if there are other comments.
You want to raise your hand? You declare the testimony you're about to give in this case to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. State your name and address.
Jimmy Payne, 13600 Still Pond Road.
1300 Still Pond.
Road, yep, in Still Pond. And
Jimmy Payne, all right. Payne.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
So at the end of the day, the project has the same negative impact agriculturally. It's the same footprint, the size of it's all the same, but there's only half the benefits to the community. Is that right? That's all. I just want to make sure I understood that. Thank you.
Okay, are there any protestants in the audience?
I believe we just heard from one.
Yeah. Any other protestants? And raise your right hand. Do you declare the testimony you're about to give in this case to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
State your name and address, please.
Andrew Simmons, 26004 Still Pond Neck Road.
Okay, Mr. Simmons?
I'm sorry. Andrew
Simmons,
Simmons, okay.
SIMMONS.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, my only concern, I agree with Jimmy, the benefits half for the same impact. And the other concern I have is I really feel like the question was brought up way back in one of the other meetings about the infrastructure and would the infrastructure work, the existing infrastructure. And my concern there was, were they going to have to add high tension poles, whatever they might need. So I was kind of surprised to see in the letter that was in the, on your website about how much infrastructure they would have to add to make it work. So that would just be a concern I would have going forward, is what is that infrastructure going to look like if they have to add a whole bunch of infrastructure to make it work? Or if somebody posed the question, they're keeping it the same size, so can they come back and put all the rest of the panels in? Now you're going to have to increase the infrastructure. What's that going to look like? That would be my only concern.
Do you want to answer that?
Maybe Mr. Spencer can answer that. What are what are we gonna get for $300,000 and what's it gonna look like?
Yeah, so, on Exhibit B here,
I'm sorry, which one?
Exhibit B,
B as in boy?
yes, B as in boy. Under distribution and telecom, those would be the improvements that are needed. The substation one would all be on the utility property at the substation. But under distribution and telecom, we have, installation of one 600 amp recloser equipped with disconnects and proper relaying and communications. So that would be, basically on the actual property where that recloser would be at. And then, you have pole and equipment to support primary meter equipment. So that would be another pole on the property. So that would take care of the distribution improvements. Telecom, the biggest thing, is the installation of approximately 35,000 feet of overhead ADSS fiber optic cable, splice points and associated hardware. And so the fiber cable will support communications to the utility-owned recloser. So basically for the utility to have their own, basically shut-off switch that's, able to be remotely controlled, they have to add that fiber optic cable to, existing poles out there, I believe. And so those would be the improvements that would be, seen by the public essentially.
Okay, so the public will see an extra overhead wire,
Essentially, yeah. And then, on
the
the,
600 amp recloser.
yeah, and so those two poles would just be on the actual subject property and the utility would have easements on the property. But those would be out of the public right away.
These are just telephone poles? They're
Yeah, they're basically what they look like. Yeah, they're telephone poles and they just have, basically the equipment, kind of where the transformers would be in a normal, utility electrical pole.
what's the height of those?
I'm not sure off the top of my head, but it's probably somewhere between, 15 to 25 feet or so, I believe.
Okay.
I'd have to
So
get their
this-
design to know for sure exactly what the height would be.
So this is saying the power company doesn't have to rewire between Lynch
No,
and your site?
no, they would be adding fiber cable, but they're not having to, run, additional, like a whole new, basically pole system, no.
So is that like internet fiber cable?
Yes, correct,
That's
yeah.
side of it.
That's exactly what it would be.
So would that be available to
No, that's just
the
a time.
community
No,
as
it's
well?
Dedicated for
No.
DPL, right?
Yeah, it's just to go basically from their substation, basically to the property, to that recloser. Yeah.
Just trying to show another benefit to the community.
Yeah,
Although, don't
Yeah,
say
it would be
right
nice.
by. Wouldn't hurt to ask.
And that's so that they can shut it off remotely?
correct, yeah, so if,
That if there's a problem or it creates an overload? At 533, whatever it is,
I think, yeah, I would say probably the biggest thing is just, from them monitoring their grid and their system, if for some reason they just needed to be able to, shut that off, they can do it without having to, send somebody out to get it
With the
on site,
switch,
yeah.
okay.
What's the life expectancy of this? Is that any different?
So typically, we have basically a lease for 20 years, and then we have two more extensions for 10 years essentially, so the lifespan for most of these solar arrays would be 20 to 40 years.
The panels, things like that, what's the life
I
expectancy?
think the, optimal life expectancy is probably in like the 25-year range, I think after, maybe like 20, 25 years is when you start to see some larger efficiency losses over time. But those are kind of probably the optimal, window for the longevity of the panels.
Are panels available, or is there a back order?
So we actually, as a company, get a lot of them and basically store them. So we're having to order, a large amount of them. So that's typically not the longest lead item for us. A lot of times it's the actual transformers that we're having to order for the site. Those can take over a year to get like a transformer, basically. Yeah.
So those will be ordered a year before?
Essentially, it's usually one of the last things essentially that gets, added to the site. So you can still construct everything else. You can construct the panels, you can construct, you know, the access drives, the fencing, the landscaping and all that. Typically, the transformer is one of the last things that end up actually going into the project before we, you know, interconnect with the utility.
Are you in Denver?
I'm actually in San Antonio.
You flew out here for this?
Yes.
Wow.
Got to go out to Western Maryland a little bit earlier, so got a good view of the state today, yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. Any other questions from the audience? Okay. Do the protestants want to make a statement or come back before the board, Mr. Payne or Mr. Simmons? No. Okay. We'll call staff. You declare the testimony you're about to give in this case is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
Please state your name and position, please.
Mark Carper, Associate Planner.
Okay, and staff's recommendation.
Staff recommends extension of the previously approved special exception for this project.
Okay, and your thoughts on timeline? How long an extension would you feel would be reasonable with regard to the request?
Well, initially, we had proposed for 1 year, but given what's spoken today, it makes sense to do it a year and a half type of extension.
Okay. And concerns regarding the decrease in public service or decrease in benefit to the community?
Well, that's one a little bit hard to speak to in terms of a decrease. It still provides benefit to the community in terms of reduced rates for those subscribers. There'd be fewer subscribers available or that could tie into this particular system. But it does provide an opportunity for people to subscribe, so it does provide that benefit. In regards to some of the other things discussed, for screening and landscaping, there's one particular spot, if you remember, where the glare potential is a bit higher, and the landscape plan does include having taller trees at the point of installation to address that particular concern.
Mr.
Is there any restriction on what they can do with the open space in the enclosed area, since it won't be filled up with solar panels?
No, there's nothing in the ordinance regarding that.
Could they come back and put more solar panels in without coming before us, or coming before the planning commission?
That's a good question. I think the approval was for what was originally proposed, that set of scale and the components of that particular system. I don't know if this particular approval would have to specify this extension, that there would be a change, and that would be a condition. I'm unsure.
I should think that the conditional use, keep using it, calling it that, in this county, it's special exception, approved a 1 megawatt project. So if they could figure out a way to, at some point in the future, come in with more panels, I think they're entitled to do that.
Or more efficient panels?
More efficient, so long as the footprint's the same.
Footprint's the same.
Yeah.
Within the 5 acres?
Yeah.
Within the 5 acres, but, you know, we approved 1 megawatt.
Yeah.
And they're not gonna build a 1 megawatt.
Yeah, but they can choose to, they can always choose to be less, can't do more.
Ms. Horsey, you have any questions? I don't have any questions. Anyone in the audience have questions for the staff? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Does the applicant wish to make a final statement?
thank you for your time tonight. Everybody has put a lot of effort into this project. They are here. They do want this to proceed. It will proceed. It's not a situation where a lot of time has gone by and they just haven't been working on this. They've been working on this diligently. And it's, so our desire would be to have that longer extension period, just so that we're not back before you again. So 18 months would be preferable. Obviously, something could come up that could delay it, but that I think would be a better amount of time to have in this case. So we believe that the board has the authority to approve the extension. We would ask that you do so based on the evidence presented tonight, and thank you for your time.
I have one, I guess, burning question. I don't know if it's if it's going to have should have an effect on the decision, but I'm curious as to even with the reduction of $1.7 million, you're going to put a lot of money. You're going to put several $100,000 into this project to service 150 homes, and you're going to give them a 10 to 25% discount. I'm curious as to what kind of profit you're expecting to make from this kind of thing. I mean, you obviously want to do it. You obviously are working hard. You know, I'm very respectful of the fact that you brought in really good people to address the issues that we've had. We don't always see that in little Kent County. So, you know, it's really nice, but it's kind of a burning question that I have that I just don't see how you can justify it, but maybe over 20 years you can justify it, but.
Yeah, so that exactly like you're speaking. So basically, we have people internal into our company that build models based on, you know, this upfront initial cost, and then we look at, you know, over the years, you know, how much, you know, how many dollars are we estimated to bring back in? How many, you know, tax credits are we going to be able to bring back in? You know, with the federal legislation that's been passed, you know, that is another, you know, area where it can benefit your company as well.
Do you get tax credit for these solar projects?
Yeah, so I'm not 100% sure on all of the, you know, financing, you know, kind of wizardry that kind of goes on in the back end. But yeah, we do, as part of this, we do get some, you know, tax, you know, credits or elements that are part of that federal legislation from this previous year.
As I mentioned earlier, we are paying for some of this.
So we are.
Yes.
So in the scheme of things for the property owner, it'll be incidental to the use of his farm, right?
Sorry, was that?
I'm happy to address that. Yeah, so before we did have a discussion at one of the earlier meetings about the incidental use and talked about how that it was not so large in scale that it took over the whole farm. It was still incidental to the farm itself. And so with the reduction in the number of panels, I think that is even further the case, though we can all acknowledge that the footprint, you know, is the same essentially. So we think it still would be incidental to the principal use of the farm.
So his investment farm that he gets paid per acre to let somebody else grow crops on, the price you're going to pay him to grow electricity is incidental to that price.
Well, I mean, I think it's more a question of the use, the occupation of the space and the dedication of the space to the different use. I mean, just as an example, I could be an amazing artist. I'm not, and I could have a studio out there and sell paintings for millions of dollars, but my use would still just be a little studio in the barn. And that wouldn't take away from the principal use of the farm.
I don't think I agree with that.
The artist part, I respect that.
I'm sure someone could draw a beautiful picture with his pen.
I could not either. Somebody did.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we've heard testimony from everyone. We've heard the opposition to the application as well. It appears that nothing's changed with regard to the application. The size of the project is basically the same as far as the landscape is concerned, and I think that's our primary focus. Mr. Massey, you have any comments?
We know you're a skeptic.
I'm very skeptical. I'm very skeptical of this. But that's enough. Jim?
I'm good. I don't have any questions.
Well, I don't disagree with you. I'm concerned a little bit about it, basically because I don't, I'm concerned that we maybe aren't hearing the whole story, but.
Well, my concern is if we let this in, then what's to stop someone else out of state from buying 100 acres and doing the same thing? And then, especially if we lose the 10% rule. So we could pockmark these all over Kent County. You were concerned at the start that this would affect the Morgan Next Solar. So you had that concern, I've got this concern.
Well,
But,
I don't see where we can not approve, say, an 18-month extension to the application. Since we've approved it, they've
Right.
given us good information.
Yeah, it's
with
already been
regard to-
approved, I agree.
Well, the result would be, if you would say, no, we're not going to grant an extension, for whatever reason, they would just file an application for special exception approval, and we'd be back here in a couple of months.
Or 18 months, whatever.
Do we want to put them through that exercise, is the question.
I've expressed my concerns.
I mean, my concern is this, always has been with these solar things. It's got nothing to do with the extension. But you raised a very valid concern about the financial viability of this project. I mean, it's up to the applicant if it wants to take the risk, and the investors to take the risk. That's their choice. But what happens if the risk becomes real and and they shutter, they turn off the switch, and we have, and this is going to have to come when they come for permits, and we have a demolition proposal that suggests that the net decommissioning cost is $87,000. And we got a bond for $87,000. That worries me in all of these solar projects, the big ones and the little ones. Now, I understand it's $181,731 over 20 years. I get that. That's got nothing to do with what's going on today. It's been a bugaboo of mine for about 6 years on these decommissioning, because notice, even here, in this one, which I always complain about, they want to take $35,147.91 off the demolition cost for so-called salvage.
So we are.
Which is a complete guess, unadulterated guess about salvage 20 years from now.
So
And
we're
as far as
still-
I'm concerned, we should not accept any salvage, but that's for future issues when they come in for permits.
We're still working with staff, but yeah, we're fine with bonding the full demolition cost and not including salvage, and so
Oh,
that's.
good.
That's what
You're
we
the
are.
first solar person I've ever heard to say that.
Yeah, I mean, we've come to that conclusion that that's what'll work best for the county, so we're okay with
Okay.
doing that.
I mean, when you have the big ones and the demolition costs are $8 to $10 million, and they say they only need to bond for $800,000, you know, that's what we're gonna get with Morganic Solar when they finally come through.
I do have a question. What happens if we don't grant the exception?
They'll probably come in with an application for special exception approval.
You said they'll come back in, yeah, okay, if we don't
I
grant the
mean, there's
extension.
nothing stopping them from doing that because it wasn't a denial. If it's a denial, you gotta wait a year. But this wasn't denied, so they'll be in here.
That's right, so it's just more or
And
less.
we waived that for them. We
The 1 year
waived the
thing,
year
because
wait,
the law changed.
Actually, it would have been better if we hadn't waived.
Okay, you want me to make the motion? Okay, I move we grant the extension of the special exception, the 25809A Still Pond Neck LLC to construct and operate a utility-scale solar energy system in the agricultural zoning district with the following condition: the extended special exception, and I'll say for 18 months, will lapse after the expiration of 1 year if no substantial
Well, the
construction.
expiration of 18, after 18 months.
Pardon? Oh, 18 months. From the date of the signing of the special exception, correct? From the date of the signing, that,
Of the extension.
of the extension, from the date that it's signed, not from today's date.
Oh, yeah, for the date that you signed the decision
Right.
approving the extension, yeah.
If no substantial construction in accordance with the plans herein presented occurs.
Can we add something about the trees? No, I'll second. Out of respect for you, I'll second.
You don't have to vote for it.
That's right.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion
Okay.
opposed.
Aye.
Motion, the request has been granted, and you should be getting information within the next 30 days.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right. Okay, we have the minutes from the previous meeting,
Right.
and so we need a motion, if everyone, Mr. Hill, if everyone I was not present, so
Yeah,
it's
okay.
the
Have you looked
three of
over
you.
the minutes?
Yeah,
Okay.
Red,
So,
signed over.
Yeah, I move we approve the
Yeah,
minutes.
we approved them.
okay, do I have a second? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the minutes from the previous meeting have been approved. And is there any other business before
I
us?
think so.
Mr. Mackey, would you mind if I said something about the commissioners' meeting a couple weeks ago? The, July 25th commissioners' meeting. Would you mind if I said something about that?
Sure, I don't remember which item, but the dates all kind of blend together. Which item was that?
The wharf at Handy Point.
Yeah, sure, I mean, you're free to say whatever you want.
I attend,
The only thing is, I don't think you can take action as a board on anything, but I think if individual members comment, I don't see what the problem is. You have counsel to stop you.
No.
should I name,
We're still in public session.
should I name names or not name?
Well, I don't know what happened, so
Okay.
I'm familiar with the wharf at Handy Point.
At the July 25th, 2023 County Commissioner meeting, I attend most of the meetings. There was an item on the agenda, the wharf at Handy Point. Now evidently, was it Greenpoint and Wharf at Handy Point were bought by the same person. They have land also, which isn't marina, up on the hill. They wanted to put a sewer system and a boat storage on that land. But since the zonings are different, it was determined by Mr. Mackey that it couldn't be done. So
The two properties have different,
I think they've got the same owner now.
but they have different zoning?
I assume the property on the hill has a different zoning.
The property on the hill is not zoned
Commercial.
For Marina. or
marina
something.
or whatever it is.
Okay.
So it was determined you can't put septic on one zoning to serve the marina zoning. So they,
Where was the boat storage to be, on the hill or down below?
on the hill.
Okay.
So they approached planning and zoning, and a decision was made by the zoning administrator that the property owner didn't agree with. They didn't agree with Mr. Mackey's decision. So the normal process would be to bring it to us.
Right.
They went to the county commissioners. I sat third row, third seat, and listened to them present that to them. Now, one commissioner said that he had been to the site twice, or numerous times, taking someone with the state there. He saw nothing wrong with it. Another commissioner started talking about the Maryland Supreme Court, how they had a ruling. The third commissioner said they knew the owner, and he was a good man. He wouldn't do anything bad for Kent County. So
They approved it?
they voted, what exactly? I was kind of livid at that point.
So, just clarify, it's not on your agenda, but the item that you're recalling, the property owner put forth, not sure, I don't know if to call it a claim, that might be the wrong term, but put forth a statement that in 2002, when the county was doing the comprehensive rezoning at that time, that was the most recent time, was 2002, that there was an error in the map making, and that what was adopted by the county commissioners at that time was not correctly portrayed on the map that came out of that process. So it was termed a ministerial error. They were relying on a case from Queen Anne's County regarding growth allocation and a similar map error as their reasoning, and that was the case in point. So it was they called it a ministerial error. So the proposal was that it was actually rezoned in 2002 in the manner that the property owner described, but that the maps that came out of the process had inadvertently and accidentally not represented that correctly. And county commissioners agreed with that. So that was the item. So, yes, sir.
But it came up, that would be a legislative decision.
That one, I don't think I can opine, Chris. I don't know what category that particular
That would be legislative,
decision.
because it redid the map.
Right. I
Obviously,
can't
Mr.
opine. I mean, I understand legislative and
That is
quasi-judicial, but
I
it
mean,
wasn't.
Certainly, a reason to give a piece of property a different zoning classification outside comprehensive rezoning can be legitimately based upon a mistake. You've heard about the change or mistake rule.
Right.
Substantial change in the neighborhood or a mistake. And mistake does mean essentially a clerical error.
Clerical error, yeah.
It's, the line is supposed to be here, and inadvertently the line's here. So we move the line back to what was intended. And that may be, in fact, do we know if that, it was said that was happened and was the map been changed?
30-day appeal process, so I'll change it on day 30.
So,
I have to find a gray pencil.
but typically that would require the introduction of an ordinance?
So I mean, I don't practice law. I was sort of a
Right.
witness to this, but they were relying on case law that was different from change and mistake. This was not a change and mistake application. This was called a ministerial error, and they were relying on specific case law.
Okay,
And
well,
all that's.
mistake is ministerial error. That's the basis for rezoning, outside comprehensive process.
I'm
Okay,
certainly
well, I
familiar.
wasn't there, we're just guessing.
I'm certainly familiar with the mistake and change process.
Yeah.
This was something different. I was not familiar.
Okay,
Okay, all right.
was there an attorney pitching this?
Oh, yes. Mr. Young,
Huh?
Lance Young.
Well, he's a good lawyer.
So, all the meetings are on YouTube, Chris. You could
Well,
watch
it's
it.
just,
I don't know if I'm gonna get into it or not, but still, I don't, what was the farm? Where was the mistake? If the farm wasn't zoned marine, how did it, in the rezoning, how did it get made marina?
So the proposal relied on the fact that the applicant stated they submitted a document that showed the entire parcel and that that's what was rezoned, and that the maps that planning and zoning made were in error at the time.
That they submitted a document showing that farm had been rezoned in the,
That they submitted a plat, which was a plat that showed the entire property. So basically, the proposal was that in 2002, it actually was rezoned, and our maps are just incorrectly portraying that.
how could it be rezoned without a specific application to rezone the property?
So now we're talking 2002. That, I'm not going to be able to help too much with that.
Well, that's why I say,
I was enjoying the autumn leaves in New England at the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
all right.
All right. Do you need a motion for adjournment?
Yeah.
So I move we adjourn the meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.